So it's such a amazing opportunity here, speaking with a good friend of mine, Daniel Nguyen. Daniel is an amazing guy, and thank you so much for being here, Daniel.
No, thank you.
Daniel has a great story background from a migrant family, going through and already in the early days of his career having achieved great success. I'm really excited to be here talking with Daniel and sharing with you some of the great knowledge and experiences Daniel has.
So that role sort of is operating sort of the day-to-day work of a membership body, which represents a body of Indigenous law students and lawyers, particularly those in Victoria, looking at sort of increasing the representation of Indigenous people working within the law, and then also understanding sort of the organisation's place within the community, working on a sort of policy and law reform basis as well to make sure that we get good legal outcomes for the wider Indigenous community here in Victoria. No doubt, and I guess like what you've been able to do with AMK Law is really a representation of what sort of like true self-determination looks like, in the sense of having Indigenous people running, leading their own show, and then being able to then also contribute to community as well. And it's, again, we often sort of talk about our members pursuing whatever opportunities they wish, but again, having the opportunity to really step out, do that on your own 2 feet, be able to build something successful is really, the aspiration of many as well. Yeah, I actually think we're in a really sort of exciting place at the moment. I think particularly when I look at the young people that are coming through, the ones that are sort of studying at the moment, they're fierce, they're passionate, they know they have a connection to their culture, which I think is really important. And I think what we also have now is we also have people like yourself and others who are in sort of positions where they can draw on that experience and be able to sort of really guide some of the younger people. You have people like, Magistrate Birchall, Magistrate Fowler, the first 2 women, Indigenous women to be appointed to the bench, and we have people like that who are always so much willing to give up their time and work with that group. And I think that's what's really exciting, is that you sort of have that balance. There's still a lot of work to do. There's still a lot more that the profession needs to do, but I guess from an individual basis, there's some really talented young people, some really talented people in our positions of leadership, and being able to bring those 2 together, I think, is what's really going to drive that sort of next generation through. The legal system is a very old, in my eyes, a very archaic system, from a Western sort of, principles. But I guess, what hopefully I think I aspire to see within the law is the understanding of those different cultures, and particularly our sort of Indigenous culture here and the law that brings, and being able to bridge those 2 worlds together and really then be able to develop, I guess, a fairer and just system through that, instead of what probably we have now, which is a little bit sort of dominated from a previous sort of generation. Yeah, I think it really depends on sort of the situation. Some of the things, if I take, for example, like my time when I was mayor, I had probably a different approach to it than perhaps with Tarwiri, and I'll sort of maybe give you that example. Like, I think sort of when I was mayor, sort of, because such a bigger organisation, a larger sort of spectrum of people to work with, I think one of the things I really took out of there, and I can't remember who told me it, but something that I sort of tried to sort of live with, is that sort of being a leader of an organisation a bit of a larger size like that, it's being able to sort of understand the day-to-day ongoings, the small issues that are happening, and addressing some of those issues, but never being bogged down by that, always being able to keep an eye on the aspirational, the bigger picture, and what sort of an organisation or a group of people being able to achieve. And I think that, to me, represents what a true leader is able to do, is knowing what's going on the ground, but then making sure that as sort of, the leader of that organisation, that you know where things are going and you have that aspiration and continue to drive towards that. Again, like when you've got a team under you, or when you've got a team working with you more specifically, is that you do have to give people that room to be able to aspire, because you've got some really smart, hardworking, intelligent people, and that's what you're getting them in there for, is to utilise their skills, utilise their life experiences, bring with them what they've learnt from other places, and hopefully be able to sort of drive the ambitions of an organisation or a community. I think it's a couple of different perspectives. I think firstly, in terms of, like, if I address sort of the work that you're doing specifically with Indigenous communities, I think, again, like I sort of mentioned the word before about sort of self-determination, and part of that self-determination for communities is economic empowerment, is being able to control their own destinies, and again, looking at a new lens as to what community actually is. And I think the work that's happening in that sort of commercial space, and not just with yourself, but in sort of those communities, is a lot broader than what I think the general public expects, you know. And being able to then marry those two worlds, I think, is going to be really powerful for the future. I think if you're talking about sort of more generally around perhaps like Indigenous lawyers in that sort of corporate space, once again, like, you know, what it, for me, comes down to is sort of a level of fairness. I think is understanding that often when I talk to perhaps people who are in the law in different areas, it's trying to not seem to be pigeonholed, as in not every, you know, Indigenous person who is in the law wants to perhaps be working on Indigenous rights. They're most likely and always fiercely passionate about those, and they're most likely and already doing things in that space. But perhaps again within their profession, they're choosing to explore, you know, a different perspective, and being able to give them that freedom, being able to sort of respect that, I think is also really important for the general legal profession to understand as well.